Senator Warren, thank you so much again. I'm really excited to chat. We've seen a lot of financially relevant headlines recently, but I live in the social media world. It feels like bing, bang, boom. Every 10 seconds, there's a new update. So I wanted to get it straight from the source and get the real scoop. But also, I'm really interested in your perspective on a few things. So, really appreciate you taking the time. Let's dive right in. But first up, I wanted to talk a little bit about a big C word, credit cards.
Yeah.
Recently, a headline came out that said President Trump wanted to cap interest rates on credit cards at just 10%. And a little birdie shared with me that he actually called you about this. What's going on?
True. True. So actually, Donald Trump, I follow this very closely, has been saying this for well over a year that he wanted to cap credit card interest rates. So I was giving a big speech and I pointed out that he's been saying this for a year and nothing has happened. And so I was really after him. All talk, no action. So I'm in the car on the way home. Phone rings. I don't recognize the number, but I think, it's a Washington area number. What the heck? I answer the phone and it's the White House switchboard, which switches me over to Donald Trump. And he says he really wants to do this. And I said, great. We could actually do this, Mr. President, but you're going to have to work it. I can get the Democrats, but you got to bring along the Republicans. And he says, yes, let's do it. That was 6.5 weeks ago. In the meantime, I have called his chief of staff. I have texted. I've sent my team over with the documents on laying out how we could do it. And so far, all talk, no action.
I think that's a really big bummer because I'm sure you saw some bank CEOs and folks who are the heads of financial services, they seem to be pretty, up in arms about this. Why were they so frustrated and what do you think is actually in the works back there?
Okay, so Vivian, you're a numbers gal. Let's just do a few
Let's do it.
numbers here on this. What would this mean for the average person who's carrying credit card debt if they took the interest rate down to 10%? On average, the person carrying credit card debt would save $900 a year. That's money you could put to pay down your credit card balance. It's money you could use to buy groceries, money you could use to invest, right? So this is a big deal for people. Last year, credit cards brought in for the banks $150 billion. And the banks, just to give you an idea, banks right now, the big banks, more profitable than ever before in history, paid out $140 billion in dividends and share buybacks. So they love that credit card interest rates. So here's the deal. A lot of people say, well, I'd like to see lower interest rates, but won't that mean that the banks will stop lending to people maybe who don't have as much money, who may have a bump on their credit record? Let's stick with the numbers for a minute. So across their whole loan portfolio, what kind of profits do the banks make? What kind of return do the banks make in their return on assets? And the answer is 1.5% on all of their lending. Whoa, except for credit cards. Credit cards, it's 6.8%
Oh, wow.
return on assets. Yeah, wow. So if the credit card companies push those interest rates down, then what happens? They're still profitable because they got plenty of room here. And how do I know they're profitable? By the way, because smaller banks, because credit unions already are charging much lower interest rates. And you know what? They're still doing fine on making money on this. So this is really a case of what the banks are saying when they say, oh my gosh, we'd be forced to cancel everybody's credit card. What they're really saying is they want to protect the goose that's laying the golden eggs, and they want to keep gathering all those eggs up for themselves. Putting a 10% cap on interest rates on credit cards, people still have access to credit. There's still room to make a profit. It just won't be the ginormous profit that they're making right now. And actually, let me add one more point because you'll appreciate this. They make money on credit cards more than just by interest rates. They make money on the swipe
Mhm.
fees. Every time they run it through that little machine,
Interchange.
they get a couple of cents off every one of those dollars that's coming through. So they're already making money on that. Plus, credit cards are a way that they sell all the other things out there. So, how do they get you to do the next car loan? Well, because they keep reminding you you have a credit card with fill in the blank, Citibank. We want to be your car lender too. We want to be your mortgage lender too. We want to have your checking account. We want to be the provider for your CD. In other words, credit cards are kind of the gateway, the entry. So the idea that, oh, they're just going to quit doing credit cards, listen, we're a lot smarter. You're a lot smarter. The folks who listen to you are a lot smarter and know that that's just these guys shining you on because they want to keep you paying 20, 23%, 26%, 29%, because they love that money they're getting from you.
They love that margin.
Mm-hmm,
Now, on to another hot button topic, private
mm-hmm.
equity and housing.
Oh,
Talk to
yeah.
me about what issues we're seeing in this space and what exactly is going on.
Okay, so let's start here. What is the problem? Problem right now is Wall Street has discovered homes, your home, the neighbor's homes, your neighborhood. They've bought up around 500,000 homes around the country. In some areas, not so many yet, but in some areas like Atlanta or Charlotte, they own 1 out of 4 homes already. And the consequence of that is twofold. It means if you're trying to buy a house, and boy, you're out there, you've penciled it out what you can afford, you want to do an inspection because you don't want to buy a house and have to pay for a lot of repairs immediately afterwards, you find out you've just been scooped by some billionaire investor who makes an all cash offer and boom, the house just disappears from the market. And that's what's happening to a lot of buyers. That's one half of the problem. The other half of the problem is they buy these houses up and duplexes and quadplexes and small apartment buildings, and they own so much of the rentals in the area. They consolidate them, and like any good monopolist, they then start pushing the prices up. So it means people who want to buy a house get smacked and renters get smacked. And they're all getting smacked because instead of a home being a place where you live, a place that you're investing in to strengthen your own financial future, it's a target for increased profitability from a handful of Wall Street cowboys.
And
Mhm.
specifically, private equity firms and large institutional investors own roughly like 3 to 4% of the total US single
Yeah.
family rental stock. So, talk to me about why Americans should care about this. Why is this so important? Because these days, I hear a lot of young people just saying, I'm never going to own a home. Who cares?
Right, right. Well, right off the top, that's about, like I said, not quite a 500,000 homes. You put those 500,000 homes back on the market, that's a lot of
Mhm.
houses that people can buy. And in areas where private equity has already gobbled up whole neighborhoods, that would be a lot of opportunities for home buyers to be able to come in. But the other reason to get engaged now is before they get bigger.
Mm.
Because if you're lucky enough to be in a city where they haven't yet come in and started gobbling up all the houses, then just wait, because that's the whole game. They've figured out, you're in the front end of just having figured out, whoa, this is profitable. We're learning how to run this at scale. And now just start marching through city after city, neighborhood after neighborhood all across America. And look, Vivian, if this is the direction, then the whole idea that a home is a place you live in and also a place that helps you increase your financial stability and even provides the kind of security, if you need something to borrow against, you need collateral so you can start a business, all of those things. A home has been middle class America's opportunity to build financial wealth, opportunity to build real security. All of that goes away if private equity just turns us into nothing but a nation of renters forever.
And I can tell that you feel super passionately about this, so much so that you actually just introduced a bill. Can you
I did.
explain what you're trying to accomplish with this?
Yep. So the bill basically says the biggest boys, the ones on Wall Street, the big institutional investors, they got to get out of the market. They don't get to buy, they don't get to, and they've got to sell what they own and push this back into private hands. Now, it also has the other half, and it says small investors, mom and pop landlords who buy up 10 or 15, we go all the way to 50 different houses or duplexes or triple deckers. They're okay. They can still do it because they provide competition in a marketplace. You got a lot of different landlords out there, right? And that helps keep rents down. So the bill says we're going to draw a distinction between these giant institutional investors and the mom and pop investors. One has to get out of the market, the other can stay in the market. And then the other thing we say is, however, we're going to leave the door open. If Wall Street absolutely wants to invest in real estate, if they're building new stuff, then they can still get tax breaks for doing that. But they got to be bringing new stuff on the market, not gobbling up the existing supply of housing.
I actually love that. And I also think that that's so common sense. Like 50 properties is
Yeah.
a lot of properties for a mom and pop to have. So this really still provides a lot of space for individual investors. So thank you so much for championing that. I want us to pivot a little bit now onto everybody's favorite T word, tariffs. Saw that the Supreme Court ruled that Trump's IEEPA tariffs were actually just not legal. IEEPA
Yep.
does not allow him to implement tariffs. And unsurprisingly, business owners are now frothing at the mouth for refunds. But what exactly can people expect? Are refunds going to be a real thing?
Well, let me tell you this. They should be, because it's kind of law 101 that that when you take something illegally from somebody, you got to give it back,
Restitution.
right? If I snatch your purse and run away and I get caught, I actually have to return the purse. You don't have to sue me. I just have to give the thing back to you, right? That's the deal. And the Supreme Court just ruled that Donald Trump and his administration collected $175 billion that does not belong to them. So who really paid that money? Remember how Trump always said, oh,
Yeah.
the people in other countries will pay.
Which, by the way, just economically, that makes no sense.
Yeah, exactly. It makes zero sense. And in fact, now the economists have worked through the data, and what it shows is families, people, folks who bought stuff are the ones who paid for it. They paid more than 90% of that money. That works out on average to about $1,700 per household in America. For all the things people bought. If you bought shoes that were made somewhere else, we make almost no shoes here in America. If you bought electronics that were made somewhere else, shoot. If you ate groceries, if you ate a banana, you paid tariffs because Donald Trump put a tariff on them to come in, and then those higher prices were passed along. So what would it take to get your money back? Well, the first thing it would take would be to have a president of the United States who thinks you should get your money back. And we are stuck right there at square one because his view is he doesn't have to give it back. He just says, no, he's not. Secretary of the Treasury is all there for Donald Trump. And he just says he doesn't think the American people are ever going to see that money. Even though, and boy, does this one get me, Vivian, back when they were litigating, when they were actually in court over the legality of these tariffs, the folks who were challenging the tariffs asked for what's called a TRO, temporary restraining order, saying don't let them collect these tariffs until you determine the legality, because it looks pretty illegal on its face. And the Trump administration stood up and said, oh, no, 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 you don't have to do that. Because if it turns out these tariffs are illegal, we're going to give the money back. And they should have to give the money back. So the courts let them keep collecting the tariffs for almost a year now. That's how they got so much money. And Trump and his Secretary of Treasury are saying they're not going to give the money back. So what can we do? Well, first of all, we can raise a lot of noise about it, because hearing more from more people, more small businesses who say, I want my money back, that matters. And I was just at a lunch with a bunch of Democratic senators, and I'll just tell you flatly, they were saying, if we get back in the majority, we're giving people their tariff money back, because I think that's the right thing to do.
Hmm. And I know we are running out of time, but very quickly, last question. It's almost March.
Sure.
Lots of people are starting to think about filing their taxes. We previously had a really great free program directly with the IRS called Direct File, but that was actually shut down by this administration. What gives? And do you have any updates in regards to tax season? Help us here.
Okay. So, in most countries around the world, you can just file your taxes
Yeah.
online. It's actually pretty easy. So, starting a couple of years ago, the IRS, bless them, actually set up something called Direct File. It wasn't available in every state. It was a pilot program, and people loved it. It's free, it's easy, it's very secure. You just answer some questions and you're done. And frankly, cheaper for the IRS because people make fewer mistakes, right? Because they can correct them as they go on. Fabulous program. TurboTax makes money from selling you uh, tax preparation that they then file for you. So Intuit, the company that owns TurboTax, contributes $1 million to Donald Trump's ballroom or inauguration. And guess what? The IRS decides to shut down the direct file program. So this year, it's just not out there. Now, yes, this really chaps me. So I've introduced a bill. Are you
Mhm.
ready? With 150 co sponsors
Wow.
here in Congress, Senate, and House, to say, okay, we're not going to do this because we're just going to rely on the IRS doing the right thing. We're actually going to make it a law that you got to put direct file, you got to make it work and make it free so that Americans are not spending 150
Mhm.
bucks to go file their taxes. So this year, when you pay to file your taxes, you can send a thank you note to Donald Trump and the Republicans for forcing you to pay in order to pay your taxes, because that's just wrong.
That is so frustrating, but thank you so much for your time. Any last words of wisdom for the average consumer?
Yep. And that is hang in
Mm.
there. You know, there's a lot right now that you and I have talked about, and sure, it's frustrating and aggravating. But the point is, we're in play. We're in this fight. We're in this fight for this 10% credit card cap. We are in this fight to keep Wall Street out of our neighborhoods and our homes. We are in this fight for direct file and to get your money back on your tariffs. So, yeah, it's tough and people are squeezed against the wall. But there really are folks who are out there fighting for you. And it's an honor for me to be in this fight alongside you, Vivian, and all the people who pay attention and say they're not going to roll over and play dead. They are going to push back on these financial issues.
Thank you so much, Senator Warren.
You bet.